Welcome everyone to AZ Ray Videos, where we go a little bit deeper than your traditional X-ray and we examine various films, other mediums, historical topics, anime, you name it, music. But for today, we're going to focus on the substance and how it's centered around nostalgia, isolation, and aging. I love this film. Probably one of my favorite film of the last 5 years. I think Kohali Fauja is one of the great next upcoming directors in general. So happy I watched this film. Let's get into it, guys. Let's dive deep. The film starts with our main character, Elizabeth Sparkles, dying essentially. Not a traditional death, but a metaphoric one, and in some ways literal. But what I'm basically trying to say with that is that she ends up getting laid off her job. The film starts on her 50th birthday, and instead of being a day of celebration, it's filled with tragedy. All she is given is a bouquet of roses and a gift that we later find out is like a French book. So, and before I go any deeper, guys, just a spoiler alert. I'm not going to go in too deep with the plot. This video is going to focus more on the symbolism, but just a spoiler alert warning in case you haven't seen this yet. Definitely watch it. I think you would get more appreciation from the film if you just watch it and click on here and don't join our discussion. And I'm essentially starting the discussion here on the film. Okay, now back to the topic. Elizabeth Sparkles here, who's essentially metaphorically dying, and she's lost. She doesn't know what to do. She's puzzled. She's devastated, and she gets this offer, right? The quote unquote substance, the film's namesake. And this is supposed to be her answer, right? It promises to make you your younger and best version of yourself, right? And of course, it comes with the risk, right? Because it'd be a happy story otherwise. It's a horror film. So we deal with all those repercussions as a result of that, and that's where the nostalgia, the isolation, and the aging takes place. Let's the way we're gonna go about this is that we're gonna first focus on Elizabeth, and then Sue, and then we're gonna talk about Harvey, and then from the Harvey we're gonna do some notes on male gaze, and then give my overall thoughts, a review, do a quote on isolation that I found very powerful, and then just kind of my overall conclusion. So let's dive first with Elizabeth Sparkles. The reason why I feel like nostalgia is very effective from her is, as I just mentioned, she is looking for the substance, for the solution, for this great thing that's going to help her through her tough time, right? Which is unfortunate, right? Because this film puts a magnifying glass on beauty and on the aesthetic, and kind of saying that, it's almost the only superficial thing that matters. We're not asking how she's doing, how she's feeling, her mental capacity. There's not a psychological backup test to essentially see if she's even mentally sane enough to take a substance that can morph her or change her forever, right? It's kind of weird, right? But she takes the substance anyways and just kind of sees it as a Hail Mary, not even mattering what the risks or the potential repercussions may be. So she takes it, and then she takes it for her nostalgia, right? Because it's like she's hoping for the past. She wants to be in a place where she was idolized, where she was more respected, right? She's an Academy Award winning actress in this film's world. She's a very successful fitness, I guess, guru. She has like her fitness show. She's like a fitness person. She has like a daily show that's very popular, and she wants to go to the better days where she was more loved and respected, right? And not as an afterthought. And that's what transitioned nicely to the afterthought is isolation, right? She's very isolated. She's bummed out. She has all this wealth and all this success, but no one to share it with, and it sucks. And she becomes more and more isolated as the film progresses because she becomes forgotten, left to the side, like a wiltering, dying plant, or just treated like dirt, right? With no importance. And it's devastating because she's supposed to be the main character and she gets taken advantage of and used. And of course, that makes her more and more isolated, more angry, depressed, and just torn because this is what she wants. She wants to have a younger version of herself, but it's costing her life, her sanity, her joy. And she isolates herself even more because she can't even go outside and she can't even like enjoy the world. She can't even enjoy the fruits of her labor, enjoy her retirement, right? Like, why can't she just enjoy retirement, right? And it has to do with, the pressures of being a female, right? This film's biggest theme is critiquing the male gaze, right? And just the unjustness that a lot of females go through. And it's very empowering in a way that the film throws it in your face that, like, this isn't okay. The way this quote unquote life is set up for this character, taken advantage by sleazy Hollywood executives. But it's just like everyday women deal with this kind of stuff in general, right? With creepy guys, people obsessed with the physical aesthetic and not really asking about how the woman's doing or just looking out for their well-being or treating them like a human instead of like an object. But we'll go into later on, we'll focus more on the male gaze, but I just brought it up here because it's just adding on to her isolation because she feels the need to live up to this ideal, this like perfect, gorgeous, beautiful female when she has much to offer. I'm sure. And then the fact that she's a Academy Award winning actress, right? She has these talents. She's not just your regular person. She should be respected, given the same equality that men deserve, right? And her career should continue or transition into something else, right? Why isn't there a natural transition for her? It's quite hard and it's quite devastating. And so that brings us into the aging thing. This film does a great way of freaking people out over aging. And although I think in general people are probably more proactive towards aging because there's a lot of like different self-care and health things that we can do or even like plastic surgeries and whatnot. I still like how the film just kind of says how like some people are just scared to be old, right? And don't be old. I'm not old, and it's this whole process too, and it starts breaking the character. It literally breaks her. She can't believe that she's like this old, weakened, debilitated version of herself. And it's unfortunate because it's not like she gets to get age naturally. It just hits her all of a sudden because she's getting drained by Sue. And so it's one of the sad things of aging. And the other theme that it talks about is aging is just how because Elizabeth Sparkles is a woman and she's getting older, or she's quote unquote on a on a ticking clock, right? And it sucks. And women have several ticking clocks, right? Like you have a quote unquote supposedly a prime, right? Or like, the beauty of youth, and then you have a short time span. Like once you hit 40, it's harder for you to have kids. That's another time clock, right? And then time clock to find a husband or a partner if you're like a part of LGBT non-binary, right? There's all these societal pressures, and it's just that are related to age, and they're kind of BS. They shouldn't matter, but there's focus and it's tradition and it's culture that plays all these roles, and it just adds on to all this stress and drama. And then that brings us to our next character who we examine, who's Sue, who is literally dependent on Elizabeth from the get, right? And she's she's an interesting character because she's essentially like a living, talking virus that is just trying to live by any means necessary. You can see that Sue is doing her best to hold on to her life, but she can't. She can never have a normal life. She's always going to be dependent on Elizabeth, and without Elizabeth, she can't live. And she's doing her best, right? She's trying to live up to all these like nostalgic dreams that Elizabeth has, right? She wants to like be on like Vogue magazine, be on late night talk shows, to be loved and idolized and appreciated and adored and beloved. And she's doing her best to just fulfill that for Elizabeth. But as she does it, she doesn't do it in a methodical way, in a planned out way that works for both Elizabeth and Sue. And so they can both have a balanced life. She doesn't. She, like I said earlier, like a virus, is just trying to suck up all the juice out of her host and just trying to do things her own way. And it's devastating. And you see the ultimate repercussions of her decisions. And then she starts forming nostalgia in her own right. She longs for days when it was simple and she was beloved and she was following the 7 day principle and she was able to have a normal life ish. But she screws that up and she starts taking advantage of Elizabeth more and more and more and more. And then you can see Elizabeth's getting crazier and angrier and more senile because Sue is taking advantage. And I believe she does it for a series of months. So she can essentially blow up her star, but it's at the cost of Elizabeth's life. And she literally ends up becoming a monster. But she always was a monster. Sue was not a real person. She didn't grow up. She didn't have a childhood. She wasn't nurtured into adulthood. Sue essentially is the continuation of this mitosis cloning like process. And she is a monster. She always was a monster. She was this devious thing. And she becomes that in the end. And she shows her true self. And unfortunately, in her true form, she's not beloved or appreciated. And of course, she wasn't going to be because she never respected life. She never respected Elizabeth. So she got what she deserved, essentially. And then that brings us to the isolation, right? The reason why Sue goes through isolation is because, as I mentioned earlier, she can't have a normal life. She can't have a boyfriend because of this dependent on Elizabeth unless she brings someone in that she trusts and like lets them know like, hey, I have this secret. But you can see that both Elizabeth and Sue don't have the mental, psychological, emotional, or spiritual makeup to really have the maturity, kind of have those conversations, to have those deep, meaningful relationships. But it's also because their characters aren't allowed to have those relationships. They're only seen for their beauty. They're not seen for their intelligence or their abilities or their maturity. So why do I have to develop something that's not going to be appreciated? So that makes her isolated and alone. And it's heartbreaking, and that's the tragedy and the fear of the film. Exactly, you kind of can see the writing on the wall that like, oh shoot, Sue's not going to have a happy ending, Elizabeth's not going to have a happy ending. And it's like, dang. And that's what makes this film so great. It's horror in the most realistic way possible, right? Through aging, through getting older, through realizing that there's things that you can't change, and that life is still life at the end of the day. There's no time machines, there's no way to redo it. Even in this film, right, they create this hypothetical super serum substance, but it's not foolproof. It's also ultimately up to the user to respect it and to use it properly, right? And I alluded to it earlier, but aging, right? The aging process. Sue doesn't age like the normal person, right? She essentially starts bleeding or having like physical defects when she isn't using the substance properly, and she abuses it to the highest form, sucking literally Elizabeth dry, and then eventually becoming this monster and dying. And that ends up being the tragedy of Sue, right? the obsession of vanity, but because and vanity is its own monster. I think that's another thing that the film's trying to get you to understand, that like it doesn't matter, right? And even at the very end of the film, right? She literally blows up, she gets killed, and then literally her skin of Elisabeth Sparkles' face is crawling into her star, right? Because the beauty, it's only skin deep. It's like superficial. It's all that mattered, right? And your face is probably your most recognizable attribute. And she crawls through her star. She's just in her own delusion. She's like happy. She did it. She realized it. And hey, it wasn't a perfect ending, and it wasn't a happy ending. But hey, at least she got to have two lives, right? Her Elizabeth life and her Sue life. So there's this weird, dark, happy ending for her, or maybe she's just being an optimist. But I think it's also the reason why her name's Elizabeth Sparkle, right? She wanted to shine. She wanted to be a star, and there you go. So Elizabeth and Sue were able to shine in their own way. And this takes us to our next character, which is Harvey. And Harvey, he's a jerk. He's a sleazy executive. He's just about his bottom line. And is he nostalgic? Yeah, in a way, but not in a good way, right? He likes the old school days. He's a typical macho guy. He just cares about the female beauty and stuff. And he, like a jerk, fires Elizabeth and is it's kind of a coward about it. Can't even confront her why. Can't even give her a proper explanation. Just like, what can you do, right? It's out of his hands, but of course it's in his hands. But he doesn't take care of her because he sees her as he just sees her as like a time clock and like a number, right? And she already hit 50, and it's like, well, that's it. We can't do anything after 50. And then and he moves on quick. Discovers Sue, and he just moves on. He doesn't care, right? So he's always on to the next best thing, right? He's definitely not present. He's obsessed with the future because he's obsessed with money. He's money driven, right? And he's surrounded by all these like jerk yes men, right? Perverts, right? All these monsters, these corporate workers that are just like enabling them. They have no personality, but they all agree like, oh yeah, we like this, let's justify the male gaze and let's be perverts, and it's fine because let's not talk about the other things that women have, like intelligence, ability, skill, athleticism, nurturing, hearts, various things, right? Women's have careers too, or you know what I mean, they also have technical careers. They have all kinds of abilities, right? And this film doesn't talk about any of that, but because it's critiquing the male gaze, right? And then there's an isolation, because I think Harvey's isolated. Even though he's surrounded by people, it's like superficial. There's no real connection. There's no real profound moment from Harvey. There's no real awakening. So he's isolated in probably the worst way. He's like alone in a crowd. There's no maturity around him. It's horrible. And then the aging thing is that he has the reverse effect of Sue and of Elizabeth. Aging doesn't affect him because he's a guy. He can keep doing this job until he dies because he's a man and he has all the power and he has all the control and he makes like all the decisions. So like it really doesn't matter, right? He runs this show and it's, and he runs it how he wants to see fit. Now I want to dive deeper into the male gaze. I want to define it briefly. We don't have to get too crazy with it because that could potentially be its own video within itself. But the male gaze, it's essentially how men objectify women. And the reason why this is such a controversial or challenging idea, because Laura Mulvey, famous film theorist, essentially said that cinema is essentially life, and what we see in cinema ends up translating into life, right? And film has generally been directed by men, and it's essentially objectifying women. It's making women into this like beautiful thing, which on some level isn't bad, but of course there's always a sexual connotation to it. There's always given yeah a sexiness to it, and sometimes when it doesn't even make sense, when the scene doesn't even call for it, it's like unnecessary or just it's overbearing. And the idea of it is that it's just something we need to think about, and maybe something that we don't even realize how prevalent it is on our lives, and how our lives are so focused and manipulated on the male perspective, right? And why males run the world, and how they have this control, and it seeps into everything, right? Whether it's in fashion, whether it's in beauty standards, whether how things are objectified, on who we decide who's like quote unquote popular in Hollywood, what is seen as quote unquote as beautiful, or all these different things, right? So it's just something that we need to all think about, and it's just like, huh? Am I thinking about it from a feminist perspective? Which feminism means equality, it doesn't mean just like female power, but like, is this fair? Is this equal? Huh? You know? And it's just something to kind of just realize how it's basically seeped its way into everything, right? And how sex sells is just a normalized way of seeing life, and it's kind of everywhere now. And it shows you the power of the male gaze, right? Even in like, yeah, it seeps into a lot of things. Yeah, definitely highly recommend just kind of looking into male gaze. That's its own thing in its own right. But tying into the male gaze with the film, it does a great job of just saying that beauty and aging is normal and it's natural, and it shouldn't be the end, right? And I'm pretty sure the user kind of gets that lesson because Kohali Fage shoves it in our face. She's like, hey, this isn't okay. Elizabeth shouldn't have died for this. Sue shouldn't have been so obsessed with it, where she could have coexisted with Elizabeth in a normal way. Nobody should go through this. Nobody should go through what Elizabeth went through. Should Sue go through? And the substance shouldn't even exist. We shouldn't look for such an escape in that way, right? It doesn't resolve the issue. It doesn't. It's not fixing the issue, right? It's not like this quote unquote better vision has like more empathy, more compassion, more human understanding. She's just pretty. So hey, too bad you can't get a refund on it, right? It's like this substance didn't do the thing that it was said it was gonna do. It definitely didn't. It it came at a cost, and the cost was Elizabeth's life. And Elizabeth isn't the only person, right? There's been lots of women in Hollywood, or maybe even women that that have died because of trying to do a bypass surgery, or plastic surgery gone wrong. All these various experiences because of because of this obsession with beauty and all these different things, right? And it even critiques the beauty standards in Hollywood, which I thought was great. And it does it in both ways. One, because our characters are, at least Elizabeth's an actress, and she's in a fitness, and then the fitness industry through her like daily fitness show. It shows us that even the health industry is like contradictions. It's like, hey, you want to look like me? Do this. But then it's like, hey, but I'm not going to mention it, but I have work done, and I did liposuction. So it's like it's not even real, right? Or even in this not even female only. Males do the same thing, right? There's like TRT, which is getting a lot of popularity. There's like a human growth hormone, and all these like various performance enhancing drugs and steroids that are promise you to look great, right? A lot of men, and Hollywood have been pressured to look like these unrealistic bodybuilder action stars, right? So it's like there's a lot of things that this film's trying to tell you, and it's just like, no, there's way more to it. I didn't have a time to go into it deeper, but the colors in this film also do such a great job of conveying tone, right? You have the blues that kind of center around probably like sadness, water, and like all this like depression and maybe even tears, right? And Elizabeth's the main character that has that. Yeah, Sue has wears blue too, and there's some parallels to it. And every time she wears blue, right, something tends to happen to her in various phases. Then we have the bright yellows, right? Where when Elizabeth's trying to be hidden in her yellow trench coat, it's like, hey, I can see you, dude, because you're in a yellow trench coat. And it's not so subtle. And just, yeah, the film does a great job of like grabbing your eye through imagery. And one thing I want to focus on is the bouquet of flowers that I mentioned earlier, because the bouquet of flowers is in my opinion is like a symbolic thing, because you normally get bouquets of flowers when it comes to special occasions, whether it's like weddings, graduations, ceremonies, celebrations, but unfortunately you also get them in funerals. And in my opinion, both of the times when we see the bouquet, they both foreshadow tragedy. So the first time we get a bouquet, we see arguably the death of Elizabeth as a character, because we never see her that way again, unfortunately. And it's also the death of her career. The following time, when we see a bouquet of roses, we also see for Sue, because it's like a celebration for her great New Year's Eve hosting celebration that goes in a disaster, and she ultimately dies. So there's two deaths that are associated to these bouquet of roses, and there's a lot of foreshadowing throughout it that you can tell that which characters are going to die. And I found it great. If you can't tell already, I love this film. I highly recommend this film. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I never thought I would feel so rewarded from watching a horror movie. I never thought I would be able to learn so much, get so much depth. And this movie is the single reason that motivated me to make this YouTube channel and maybe even make more videos. Hopefully, yeah, I can make something of this if you guys like it. I hope you get some value from this. And yeah, it's been great. It's been phenomenal. And closing thoughts. The substance shouldn't exist, and of course it doesn't exist, but I hope it never does get created, right? Because there's no warnings of the potential risks of the products, right? Are the users in the film, are they test subjects, or are they taking the substance knowing that there was successful trials? It seems like they're test subjects, right? They don't seem like happy stories. And as I alluded to earlier, shouldn't a person be like psychologically evaluated before they take it? Because I think a person that should take it is someone with like health issues, someone who loves themselves, who has self assurance, who embraces who they are and embraces the future. Because you can't inject your problems away. No drug, right? Whether that's alcohol, any drug, or addiction, the only way you solve your problems is dealing with them heading on, or honestly getting help. Whether that's a professional help, psychologist, support group, getting into fitness, finding a way that helps you like release all this negativity, right? Yeah, guys. I hope you like this movie essay, this review. I hope to do more of these. I hope you get value from this. I hope you like them, because I would like to do more. Thank you so much for your time, guys. You guys have an amazing day, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.